Sir. 65 at O'Hare. Your next news at 7:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560. The Answer.
Don't forget that you can watch Chicago's Morning Answer on the Income Store live video stream every morning at 560theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy, and just celebrated the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 moon landing. And there's much talk of late, again, on the occasion of the 50th anniversary, and getting the astronauts together, too. I don't know if you saw this awesome picture. I think this is back from March when they got together.
Can I see?
8 of the surviving Apollo astronauts. It's at businessinsider.com. I'll tweet it out. Only 4 men alive today have walked on the moon, but in addition, you got other astronauts that got together in March and took this picture. And, of course, Buzz Aldrin had the loud socks and everything.
He's a good-looking man.
Okay. I don't know if he's available. He's 89. But
well, he's got to be the best 89-year-old looking man I've ever seen in my life. And I know he's probably had some work done, and he can dance, too. Remember when he was on Dancing with the Stars?
And he can throw a good right hook, too. You remember about 15 years ago something, when he's in his early 70s? He punched out some moon landing denier who was up in his face and just wouldn't let it go, and he just gave him a right hook, which good. It's fun. By the way, just since we're on the topic, do you know any moon landing deniers? You know any crackpots?
No. I've never encountered one.
I do. I know somebody who honestly believes it occurred on a soundstage.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to name his name to embarrass him, but I mean, it's remarkable. The conspiracy
tell
theories.
Me his name.
No.
Childhood friend of yours?
Buzz Aldrin, second man on the moon, right?
Right. Yes.
Something else about Buzz Aldrin that is little remembered. He was the first to celebrate Holy Communion on the moon, because Buzz Aldrin is a Presbyterian elder. Recalling later, his pastor had often talked to him about how God revealed himself through ordinary elements, bread and wine, through the work of human hands, are not much more than plain old wheat and grapes. So the act of celebrating Holy Communion on the moon, said Aldrin, could symbolize the thought that God was revealing himself there, too, as man reached out into the universe. For there are many of us in the NASA program who do trust that what we are doing is part of God's eternal plan for man. Interesting. And Aldrin has made news recently, and a few months back, too, talking about the need to get man back to the moon and fast. He essentially says with Neil Armstrong's one small step happened, but his big leap for mankind, that hasn't happened. We haven't had that giant leap. We haven't seen anything like Apollo since he believes the U.S. needs to send a new generation of pilgrims to space as permanent settlers on Mars. And
he wants to go to Mars.
Yeah, he said, who's going to go down in history? The pilgrims, the people who go and stay. They are pioneers for their country and humanity. The guys who went, came back, wrote a book or two, will be forgotten, and the crews know this. And Mike Pence said we're going back to the moon in 5 years, and we're going to Mars. President Trump and others have talked about the Space Force as part of our national defense portfolio.
Yep. They're going to put a woman on the moon, too.
Oh,
well, I'm just letting you know, so you're up to date.
Yeah, I know. It's going to be it'll be a Benetton commercial on the moon. I got it. Be model UN on the moon. That's it's actually that kind of stuff, the identity politics stuff.
That bothers me.
That's preventing it. If you read from some of the engineers who suggest, well, of course, 50 years later, it's easier to build the craft, the technological advancements. What we don't have that we had 50 years ago was the management team, the leadership, the unity of purpose, and people could crack some skulls to accomplish the mission. Really interesting. technology not the panacea for all human problems when you can't work together. For more on this topic and some other geopolitical matters, we're pleased to be joined again by Jim Carafano, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation and the author of a number of books, including Wiki at War and Private Sector Public Wars. Jim, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, so I actually ran into Buzz Aldrin the other day at the Fox Green Room, and then
You better not have denied the moon landing.
And then the next night, I saw Michael Collins at the Kennedy Center, and in which he recreated the remarks he gave to the joint session of Congress after they came back from the moon. So I am all mooned up.
All right. Well, so you're a space geek, it sounds like. So what about what Buzz Aldrin has to say, and what about what those who are part of the Apollo program say in terms of why they don't think it could be done again in this current political climate?
Well, I think we can absolutely revitalize our manned space program. I think we should. I do believe that God would have not given us all these gifts if He did not intend for us to explore. I mean, He made it part of our DNA to reach out, create, and innovate. And when we stop doing that, I think we stop being human. So I'm all in. Here's my only thing. It cost us $24 billion to go to the moon. It was 410,000 people worked on that project. For every 1 hour in space, there were 1 million man hours on Earth of work that went into getting ready, which is the equivalent of all the work you would do in a single lifetime for one individual. So we have a long-term fiscal problem in this country that we need to get a handle of, because we can't afford to go to space. We'll do it as a public-private partnership. And it's not just throwing money at something. It is something that we, as the American people, are worth doing. But, we've got to stop doing, things in government spending that are not the business of government, and getting entitlement programs and everything under control, so we can afford to actually become the kind of society that we're capable of being.
I appreciate your point, but I just have to raise one point of order. Per the Berkeley City Council, you're not allowed to use the word man hours anymore. It has to be work hours or human hours.
I'm done with Berkeley.
Okay, all right. Just checking.
And honestly, I think they're done with me.
Yeah.
Right,
Well, do you
mutual.
think the focus will be getting people on Mars as another trip to the moon?
Well, I think there are two key things. One is what we should have done the first time, which is we should have put a moon orbiter in place, right? So that's a station, kind of like the International Space Station, but orbiting the moon. What that allows you to do is two things. One, it allows you to basically go down the moon whenever you want. You just take the lander down, check it out, come back. The second is that becomes a staging base for human exploration out beyond the space of the moon. I think that is really the key vital component.
All right, switching gears, I wanted to get your take on the escalating tensions between Iran and the West with the Iranian seizure of a British vessel. Has anything changed other than London now being embarrassed with respect to the dynamic between the U.S. and allies like the U.K. and Iran?
No, I think we're in the same place. I don't think we're escalating. And what's interesting is the Iranians seized two ships when they let go. And what that clearly is, and not only did they let one ship go, the one they kept, they created a legal pretext to everybody knows it's baloney, but a legal pretext to keep that ship. What that was very clear is consistent with our current assessment of the Iranian strategy, which is they're just piling up trading cards to trade later. So now they have essentially a ship and a crew at hostage. So that's one more card that they have to play. So I know to some people it seems like an escalation, but to me it just seems like Iran is sticking with the same strategy.
But Iran, they're flying their flag now on that captured British oil tanker. So do you think? How do you think the UK should respond?
Well, I think the UK has to respond kind of within the framework of law. That was an act of piracy. And so essentially they hold Iran accountable for an act of piracy. We don't normally declare World War III on an act of piracy. If you remember, back even when we were dealing with the Barbary pirates back in Jefferson's day. We didn't necessarily declare war on the Barbary states. We just went out there and protected our ships from pirates.
We need more Captain Phillipses
I
at
was
the
just going
helm.
to say, I'm
apparently.
no
Oh, there
captain
you go.
now.
Yeah.
Too soon? Yeah.
Well,
sorry.
so how should we receive the deployment of 500 troops to Saudi Arabia?
Well, I think it's an enabler. I mean, what the United States has to have is a way to have sustained presence in the region that reassures allies and allows us to conduct military operations, but is not, breaking the bank. Having a carrier deployed to the Gulf, for example, is a very, very expensive way to police the Straits of Hormuz. So, with a more distributed footprint, we can keep surveillance and aircraft in the region and do things in a much more sustainable way, and then we can also keep our eye on Europe and in the Pacific. The other key thing is, and perversely, I think the Iranians, these are the British have helped with this, is there should be a stronger and broader coalition for policing the Straits of Hormuz. In particular, most of the oil that goes through the Straits goes to Europe. And so the Europeans should be playing in a major way. They don't want to antagonize the Iranians, but the Iranians are perfectly happy to antagonize them. It makes no sense to me why they don't push back.
I wanted to get your take on Puerto Rico now that you've had some arrests made, allegations clearly of corruption with respect to contracting pertaining the federal money that was sent to Puerto Rico after the hurricane to address the catastrophic damage the hurricane did. And boy, a lot of caterwauling about President Trump, and then we find we've got a corruption problem in Puerto Rico. Gosh, who would have thunk it? Mary Anastasia O'Grady had a good piece over the weekend in the Wall Street Journal about Puerto Rico. And one of the things she suggests, which is also sort of a shot across the bow of ungovernable states like Illinois, is that having violated its own constitution by defaulting on the Commonwealth debt in 2017, with encouragement from President Obama and House Speaker Paul Ryan, the road to a lawless resolution of the crisis is wide open. If Puerto Rico wants to save itself from full-blown descent into a banana republic, it will use its moment to recommit itself to its own constitution. She adds, more than 2 years into bankruptcy, there's still no agreement on the budget and no access to capital markets. On July 3rd, the Oversight Board sued the governor in federal court over his decision to allow municipalities to transfer some $330 million in pension and health care insurance costs to the bankrupt Commonwealth. So bankruptcy, the deal cut by D.C. for Puerto Rico as the means to essentially get out from underneath the debt that it had piled up and then reimagine Puerto Rico is not happening at a breakneck pace.
Well, I mean, I think Puerto Rico needs something like a control board similar to what we had in Washington, D.C. when we kind of lost control of our governance. When I started at Heritage, originally I was a Homeland Security analyst, and I spent a lot of time working on disaster response. And I can remember when that hurricane season wasn't just Puerto Rico; that was the third storm of the year. And I immediately, and that's not a partisan comment; it's just analysis. That I predicted that people were going to go after Trump, looking for some way to make a Trump Katrina, and it didn't matter how good or bad the response was. There was going to be a political knee-jerk reaction to disasters. They were the first big hurricane season on Trump's watch, and they were just looking for something to be partisan about. And if you remember that the first two responses went well, but they also happened in places that had very good disaster response systems, very good governance, very good governors. And even though people tried to kind of jump on the train and say, "Oh my God, it's Trump's Katrina," there was very little to complain about. And in Puerto Rico, conversely, they wanted to frame that as Trump's Katrina from day one. And the administration pushback was the problems in response are the fact that, one, you have to get to an island, and two, that you have completely incompetent governance. And the response to that was, no, Trump hates Puerto Ricans. He's just a racist. And I don't see anybody now, when you go find one of those people that were so sure the problem was Trump was a racist, and ask them about what's going on now, they are all running for cover. I'm actually surprised we're not talking about this more. because now we just have a different way to accuse Trump as a racist. I've got something else, but there's a pattern here. We just throw stuff at this administration, and then if it doesn't stick, and we find out, even if we find out a bunch of it is just lies, we just move on and throw something else at them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I knew the money would never get to the people, but there's a even bigger protest
Oh my
tonight
God!
outside the governor's mansion. Do you think he should resign? I mean, I know he announced yesterday via Facebook that he's not going to run for re-election, but that's not enough.
Well, I look. I do policy, not politics, so I don't tell politicians what to do. But I got to tell you, uh, Puerto Ricans are very super family oriented and deeply connected. So a lot of Puerto Ricans that live outside of Puerto Rico, their blood and their family and their somebody in Puerto Rico sneezes, they say God bless you. And talking to Puerto Ricans here, they're just stunned. Like, this is something we don't do. Normally, we as Puerto Ricans, we just sit there and take it. And for the Puerto Rican people to get this angry and upset about something that they know has gone on forever, and just saying we're done with this, that's really historically unprecedented.
Yeah, boy, and again,
Don't mess with Ricky Martin.
all those people, Rossello, a Hillary Clinton and Obama delegate, just for the record, a Hillary Clinton and Obama delegate, per what Jim was saying about trying to make this Trump's Katrina from the beginning, politicize it from the beginning, which is exactly what happened. And now everyone in the D.C. press corps is a church mouse about what's happened in Puerto Rico over the last 3 weeks. He is Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano, VP.